Despite the high cost of living in Southern Oregon, it actually remains pretty popular. Get it? That's a terrible joke, okay? But who doesn't like starting out a video with a horrible dad joke, am I right? I know what you're thinking to yourself right now, other than praying that I don't drop some other dumb joke, which no promises on that one. But you're wondering how the cost of living in Oregon, in Southern Oregon more specifically, compares to actually where you live right now, okay? You're wondering, is it expensive? Can you afford it? You're wondering how much does a nice house cost, okay? Well, you are in luck because today on this video right here, I'm gonna tell you all about the cost of living in Southern Oregon, answer all of those questions so that you know whether or not it makes sense to consider moving to Southern Oregon if that's what you're curious about. So why don't we just go ahead and dive right into it. So how does the cost of living in Southern Oregon compare to the national average, right? That's a super fair question and probably a great place to start with laying the foundation here of this little conversation that we're gonna have today, which, if I'm going to be honest with you, is going to be a little bit one-sided because that's kind of how video works if you're new to this, okay? So the average cost of living in Southern Oregon is about $2,500 per month for a single person, all right? And it's just about $5,000 for a family of four. And the biggest expense of that, like most other places, is housing. That's the lion's share of that expense is housing, okay? Our median home price in Southern Oregon, looking at Jackson and Josephine counties, is about $450,000, but you could spend, $100,000 or less if you were looking for a mobile home and a park, or you could spend all the way up to $10 million on some sort of big, fancy, crazy estate. We have all sorts of variety, everything in between, but median is right there about the $450,000 mark. And I don't really want to go too much into housing right this very second because I'm going to tell you all about housing and property taxes and insurance and all that stuff in a minute. So just hang tight with me right there. So the cost of living in Southern Oregon compared to the national level is actually, we're a little bit higher. We're just about 6% more than the national average, depending on which source you look at, okay? That's great, but how does Southern Oregon stack up against other parts of Oregon for cost of living? Because chances are if you're looking at Southern Oregon, maybe you're considering other parts of Oregon as well. So if you're gonna look at Eugene, Oregon, for example, it's about the same as Medford, okay? And that's where we're looking at, we're pulling our data from is Medford, Oregon, which is the biggest city in Southern Oregon. So that's what kind of makes sense to use as a reference point. So Eugene is basically the same as Medford. It's about 6% above the national average. Bend, Oregon, on the other hand, is 27% higher than the national average. Portland is about 30% higher than the national average, okay? And the Oregon coast is on the other side of the coin. It's actually most cities on the Oregon coast, like Coos Bay and Brookings and places like that, those are all usually right a little bit under the national average. And Grants Pass, for example, which is here in Southern Oregon, is just about 2.5% above the national average. So if you look at Grants Pass and Medford, that's one of the things that really comes up a lot in people that I'm talking to that are moving here from other places. They want to know which one is cheaper, which one's more expensive, what's the difference between the two. And I have a lot of different videos about that here on this channel, so check those out. But Grants Pass is definitely going to have a cheaper cost of living. And again, that's primarily because housing is the biggest driver, and houses and property taxes, not, spoiler alert, we're going to talk about that in a second, but property taxes tend to also be a little bit cheaper over there in the Grants Pass and Josephine County area. Some other notable areas, just for comparison's sake, the San Francisco area is about 145% above the national average. San Jose, California is about 130% above the national average. LA 62% above the national average, and Seattle 58% above the national average. And I called out those places because that's where I talk to a lot of people that are moving out of those places obviously for really good reason, because they're super expensive, and they're coming into a place like Medford or Grants Pass here in Southern Oregon. And so if you're used to spending 60 or 130% above the national average and you move to, that makes a lot of sense of why those people from those areas are coming here and thinking, wow, it's really cheap to live there. And that all begs the really big question that I know you're probably wondering right now, which is how does Southern Oregon compare to where you live right now, okay, in terms of cost of living? And the short answer to that is I have no idea because I don't know where you live. But the good news is that you can go onto a website called bestplaces.net, and they have a little tool on the side there. It says cost of living. And you click on that thing, and then you enter in whatever town you live in, and then you enter in Medford, Oregon, or Grants Pass, Oregon, or whatever, and it will tell you a really good comparison. It will ask you your pay, and then it'll give you a pretty good breakdown of what the cost of living difference is from one place to the other. And so again, 6% above the national average actually tends to be pretty good in comparison to the places that people are moving away from to come here, okay? I think that we're above the national average because it includes a lot of places like West Virginia and Arkansas, and places that are really, really cheap compared to the West Coast, okay? But relative to most places on the West Coast, Medford and Southern Oregon is going to be really, really affordable compared to most places over here on the West Coast. If you want to go ahead and hit that pause button right now and just go ahead and check out that bestplaces.net website, you can go ahead and do that. But make sure as you were paused that you jot down my number right here and you give me a little ring, because I can help you out with buying or selling here in Southern Oregon, or if you have any questions about moving to Southern Oregon, whatever it is I can do, just jot down that number, call me, text me. You can find my email down in the description of this video. Moving along. Okay, you know what bugs me more than anything, or maybe not more than anything, but it bugs me pretty bad, is hidden fees. Okay, nobody likes hidden fees. You expect to pay a certain price for something, and whatever the price is advertised, then you get up to the cash register to check out, and it's significantly more money. It's like, what the heck happened? Okay, and that just happened to me actually. I booked a trip to Sun River, which is a beautiful little town right by Bend, Oregon, which is a few hours away from Southern Oregon, which is one of the great things about this area is everything's so close. Anyways, booked a little family trip up there, and on VRBO or Verbo website, whatever they want to call themselves now, but here's the deal. It said the house that we were going to rent was, I think, $500 a night advertised for the family and everything. And next thing you know, you get into the checkout and it's like $800 a night. Okay, those are the hidden fees I'm talking about. There's nothing that bugs me more than that little bait and switch tactic. So anyways, where am I going with this little tangent rant? Where I'm going is I'm telling you this because there are some hidden fees here in Southern Oregon that you probably need to know about that you may not be thinking about, okay? But here's one fun little fact, okay? Because as an Oregonian, we kind of feel like we're getting the short end of the stick with these hidden fees anytime we travel outside of our state, right? Maybe we go down to California or something, let's say, pick up a bottle of water, it says it's 99 cents, you go to the cash register and it's $1.15, all right? And we think it's a scam, and it's actually just called sales tax, right? We don't have that here though, okay? And so we think anytime we get out of our state that there's some big conspiracy against Oregonians, they're just charging us more because they don't like us, and it's just a sales tax, right? But again, we don't have that here, and so it's just something to be aware of. But here's some additional expenses that you may not be thinking about that you should be aware of for if you're moving here to Southern Oregon. One of those fees is when it comes to entertainment, okay? We do a lot of outdoor recreational activities here, hunting, fishing, biking, golfing, all these sorts of fun things. And a lot of those things require some sort of investment into the equipment, right? If you want to go mountain biking, you're either going to need to rent a bike or you're going to need to spend the money to buy a bike, and buying a bike is pretty expensive. They can be thousands of dollars depending on what type of bike you want. Or if you want to go paddleboarding on the river, or you want to go rafting, or paddleboarding on the lakes, that's probably a little bit easier. But anyways, those sorts of things, you're either going to have to rent equipment or buy equipment, and that's a little extra hidden fee that most people aren't thinking about, okay? Transportation is another one, okay? If you live in a bigger city, flights are going to probably be less money if you're going out of a bigger airport like LAX or San Francisco or Salt Lake or Phoenix, one of those bigger airports. Usually you're going to have more options and be able to get cheaper flights, but out of little old Medford, Oregon, you don't have as many options, and so flights tend to be a little bit more. And your fuel costs are going to probably be a little bit more than other places because of how spread out things are here, okay? It's really nice that things are spread out, but if you're going from Medford to Grants Pass, that's 30 miles or something like that, and so there's a lot of traveling that goes on from place to place, right? I live in Rogue River, right between Medford and Grants Pass, so typically on any given day I drive to Grants Pass in the morning, and then I drive to Medford to take my son to school, and then I drive back home. So before 8:30 in the morning, I've already been to Medford and Grants Pass, and so start my day with good 50 plus miles of driving before 8:30. So anyways, your fuel costs can be a little bit more than in other areas because of just how far apart everything is, and that's obviously going to depend on where you live and where you work and all that kind of stuff. Another little hidden fee that people don't think about is wildfires, okay? And obviously the fire itself isn't what causes the fees, but if you live in a rural location, which is one of the big draws to Southern Oregon, is there's so much cool rural properties where you can have 5 acres or 10 acres or whatever. out in the sticks, and it's awesome, okay? But it's not awesome when you try to insure that thing, and the homeowner's insurance comes out then to be a lot more expensive than a place in town. So that's just another thing to be aware of, and the fact that you may need, depending on where you're at, like if you're in Josephine County, outside of the city limits, and out in the sticks, you are going to probably need to pay for rural metro fire protection. That's an extra fee, just something additional that you wouldn't have to pay for if you lived in the Bay Area, let's say, or Southern California. You probably don't pay for those things. Another thing to think about is shopping, okay? So we do have a Costco, Walmart, Home Depot, all those kind of big box stores, but we don't have is a lot of other great options for places like Pottery Barn or Williams-Sonoma, or any of those kind of more high-end clothing places, right? Like what you would need to do if you want to shop at a place like that here is you either got to go to a town that has those things, which would be like Portland or Reno or somewhere else like that, or San Francisco, whatever. You got to go to somewhere like that, or you buy it online, or you shop at more of a local boutique-y type place that is going to tend to be a little bit more expensive, okay? And so there's a lot of those here, though. There's a lot of really good options to shop local, and there's a big movement to support local businesses. And of course, that's what I encourage you to do is if you move here and you live here, support local. One of the boutique type stores to check out if you're looking for more of the high-end clothing is one that my friend owns called Urban Minx. Really awesome place for women's clothing, higher end fashion type stuff. So that's definitely one to check out. But there's a lot of those types of places, whether it be into the clothing or into local art and all sorts of different things for furnishings and stuff like that. There's all sorts of stuff like that that's locally owned, and we do have them, but they tend to be a little bit more money than the big box stores. Income tax is another one of these little hidden things that you need to think about, okay? Pretty much all states have income tax. There's a couple that don't, but Oregon does, and it's actually at a pretty higher rate than most other places. And so this little income tax conversation is one that you could kind of spin it to really fit whatever story you're trying to tell. And so I'm just going to tell you what the facts are here, okay? So I've seen articles that say Oregon has the highest income tax burden of any state in the nation, okay? And that may be true. I think what they're referencing there is the highest tax bracket tax rate in Oregon, I think, is higher than the highest tax bracket tax rate in any other state. But overall, the income tax rate here does tend to be a little bit higher. And that all sounds terrible, right? That sounds like it's going to be expensive. I'm going to give so much more of my money away. I don't want to do that. But I think the best way to really look at that is to look at the whole tax picture overall, because we don't have sales tax, all right? So yeah, you pay a little more in your income tax, but you don't have sales tax here. We also have pretty low property taxes. So when you consider all of those different taxes, the sales tax, the property tax, the income tax, the tax on other things like gas and cell phones and cigarettes and alcohol and whatever else, considering the whole tax picture, Oregon ranks 43rd out of 50 states. Okay, so number 1 is the most expensive, number 50 is the least expensive, Oregon is 43 when you look at the whole picture. Okay, so yeah, you pay more in income tax, but you do make it up on the other things like sales tax and property taxes and all those other things. So kind of cool. Since we're talking about income and income taxes and all that, the question has to be asked, and I know you're thinking of it right now, can you afford to live in Southern Oregon? I know that is a absolutely loaded question if I have ever seen one. So I'm going to give you a little bit of data to help you kind of figure that one out. The average annual salary in Medford is just shy of $60,000, and the median household income was about $65,000 according to the census, which was done in 2020. And that's slightly below the national average, which is about $75,000. So since housing is the biggest expense, I really want to dive into a little scenario with you and talk through this. So if you think about the median home value, which I said again was $450,000 in Southern Oregon, if you were to buy a home in that range and put 10% down as your down payment, and if you had a 6.5% interest rate on your mortgage, you'd be looking at a payment of about $2,560 before taxes and insurance, okay? And then if you were to add your taxes and insurance into that, your taxes for a $450,000 house in Southern Oregon would be anywhere from like $1,500 if you're in like rural Josephine County, let's say, to $7,000 or more if you're, let's say, in Ashland, okay? And that's pretty hefty, $7,000 a year for a $450,000 house. So if you add, let's say it's somewhere in the middle there, and then you have, about $2,000 a year in homeowners insurance, let's add $400 a month to the payment. to just kind of round that out, and that puts you right about $3,000 a month for that $450,000 home in this scenario. So if you were to allocate 30% of your income to housing, that means you would need to make $10,000 per month or $120,000 per year to be able to afford the median home. So that looks like, you know, two people earning the average salary in Southern Oregon, right? So it was $60,000. You got two of them together, that's 120. Okay. Of course, those numbers are going to depend on, you know, all the specifics of your scenario, right? What do you have as a down payment? What mortgage rate can you actually get? I know that there's places right now that are offering less than that. So if you can get into the fives or so, or maybe by the time you're watching this, rates are even lower than that. Who knows? But all of those things are going to be factors here. Okay. So as a rule of thumb, though, if you figure out whatever that rate is, or your whatever that mortgage payment is, and figure that that should be around 30%, probably like 28% of your income, that's the kind of the way to figure all that out. But anyways, now that you know what it costs to live here in Southern Oregon, there are a few other things I think you really need to know about this area. Some things that are not so great, okay? And I'm going to tell you all about those things on this video right here, so make sure you check that out before you make any decisions about buying or selling in Southern Oregon. Again, I'm Brian Simmons with eXp Realty, and I'd love to hear from you, so give me a little ring at the number down here on the screen, or you can shoot me an email. You can find that down in the description of this video. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.